The White House set to brief at any moment as Mexico's government now says 2 of the 4 Americans who were kidnapped in Matamoros, Mexico, have been found dead. They were abducted in a northern Mexico town that is known as a hot zone of cartel warfare. Let's bring in Victor Avila. He's a retired ICE Special Agent with Homeland Security Investigations. Stories like this are personal for him after he survived an ambush by cartel members 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago now. His partner, Jaime Zapata, did not survive that. He continues to seek justice for his partner's murder. Victor, this is said to be a case potentially of mistaken identity, which the person who led the attack against you and Jaime Zapata said was a case of mistaken identity. But it doesn't make it any less deadly.
It really doesn't, John, and my heart goes out to the families of these victims. And let's not forget that there was a Mexican national lady that was also killed by a stray bullet there. And this is eerie. I mean, this is what I went through 12 years ago in Mexico with my partner. And I want to say something about this case of mistaken identity. The cartels, they see a lot of different things that differently the way we see it. A vehicle in their turf that they don't recognize might be a threat for them and might be something that they respond with gunfire rather than to verify to see who those individuals in that vehicle are. And that's what I think happened here. They didn't recognize who these individuals were. They opened fire, and that's why they took these bodies, which is very awkward. You know, these cartels have no regard for human life. And what was very strange is that they took the bodies with them, and I think is they realized that they were Americans and they were trying to cover something up.
I remember after Jaime was killed, I went with Derek Maltz, who was then the head of DEA Special Operations, into their war room as they were conducting operations in retribution for Jaime's murder. And he showed me some photographs of cartel violence that still to this day, 11 years later, 12 years later, are sticking in my mind. So when you say that these people have no regard for human life, I mean, that's almost an understatement when you consider the brutality of what it is that they do and how they shoot without asking. And what that means, what the implications are for Americans who may be crossing the border because spring break is coming up. And as a former sheriff was mentioning on America's Newsroom this morning, thousands of kids go to South Padre Island, Texas, which is just a stone's throw from Brownsville, which is just a quick walk across the bridge into this very area where these people were killed.
Absolutely, and I'm very familiar with that area. I've been there many, many times myself, and that's why the State Department puts out these alerts, and it's important for Americans to pay attention to these alerts while traveling into Mexico, because you might be okay at a resort, but you need to understand that the cartels control Mexico. They have physical control of many, many parts. I would say 40% of the country, but the parts that are they're not physically controlled. They're controlled by their influence and corruption, and that spreads all the way to the resorts as well. You need to understand that if you travel into Mexico, the risk is very high, and unfortunately, we saw an example of that with these Americans being killed. And I can't tell people do not travel into Mexico. It's just you need to understand that you're going into a war zone.
Yeah. What's interesting to note is that Cancun International Airport, since 2019, has been the fastest growing airport in terms of traffic in the entire world. Here's what Texas Senator John Cornyn said about travel to Mexico on our program yesterday. Listen here.
It's not safe any longer, and kidnappings are fairly frequent, and the kidnappers will keep you until the ATM machine, you go past midnight, so you can make 2 separate day withdrawals to pay the ransom to gain your freedom. As shocking as this is, it's not completely surprising.
So we got 2 things at work here. We got cartel violence, where maybe a case of mistaken identity, as you pointed out, a unfamiliar vehicle in their territory. But then there's this idea, too, of kidnapping on a small scale just to get you to go to the ATM and bail yourself out. When you look at places like Cancun and the whole Riviera Maya and Tulum and Nueva Vallarta, Puerto Vallarta on the West Coast, and all of these people, thousands of people are going to be going there. And I went to Nueva Vallarta a year and a half ago for Thanksgiving. What's the level of violence there, and should people really reconsider going to Mexico?
They should really consider it, but again, they need to understand that the reason the resorts are safe is not because the Mexican government and the Mexican police want them that way. It's because the cartels keep them safe, because the cartels want the tourists to come to continue to push their drugs and their illicit activities, human trafficking and such in those areas as well. And as we see our kids, our college-age kids go to spring break, it's just, to me, I wouldn't let my 18-year-old son or 22-year-old daughter go there, that's for sure. But that's because I might know a little bit more of what's happening on the ground, and it's the risk that is just so high and unpredictable. Many people tell me, well, I went here, I went there, and it was fine, and that's great. You could go 1,000 times and back, but then it only takes that one time to be a victim of the hands of the cartel, and it's too late at that point.
Yeah, I remember way more than a decade ago, my older son went to Tijuana for spring break and was robbed, forced to go to the ATM, take out money. And that was a long time ago. So things have gotten worse since then. Victor Avila, it's great to talk to you again. We hope that you can get justice for your deceased partner, Jaime Zapata. Thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, John.